Are you struggling with your kids' behavior? In this video, I'm going to show you how to get them to behave without resorting to punishment or bribery. Hi, my name is Dr. Todd, and I'm a parenting expert and psychologist. In this video, I'm going to share with you my top tips for getting your kids to behave without fuss. So sit back, relax, and let me help you take control of your home life once and for all. When my kids are misbehaving, I like to ask myself two things. Number one, am I credible? And I'll explain that. Number two, what's the quality of our relationship right now? This way of thinking actually forms the entire basis of my model of parenting, which I think of as connection and credibility. I've even developed an entire course on this that does a deep dive into this. First, I ask myself if I'm being credible. Sometimes kids misbehave because they know they can get away with it. So we have to ask ourselves, am I being a credible, believable parent? I think being credible is so critical. And here's what I mean. And I'll illustrate this with a true story that just happened a few weeks ago. So a few weeks ago, I was walking into an exercise room, and this was right next door to an inside pool. So I walk in these doors and I walk around the pool, and there's this exercise room. And as I was entering the room, I saw these two kids playing in the pool together. They looked like they were brothers. One was probably 12 or 13, the other one was 6 or 7. Standing on the outside of the pool was their father, who was yelling at them repeatedly, "Get out of the pool now!" He's pointing his finger at them. And these kids, they didn't even hear him. They were 100% ignoring him. And it was fascinating because he kept yelling, his face was turning more and more red, and he's yelling at them to get out of the pool, and they're completely disregarding him. So I go into this exercise room and I start doing my exercising. And I'm in there for about 30 minutes. The whole time I'm in there, I'm watching this sort of interaction going on. And at one point, I just started counting how many times he yelled at them to get out of the pool. And I got to like about 30 times he said this. I'm sure he said it many, many more times. But it was interesting to see how little these kids paid attention to their dad. His anger, his yelling, his red face, that did not cause them any anxiety or concern whatsoever. It was as if they knew all they had to do was ignore him and just kind of hang in there, and eventually he'd go away. And they knew that from lots of experience. Credibility means your kids believe you. They know that you mean what you say, that you can be counted on, you're reliable. It involves boundaries, limits, expectations, structure, discipline. Well, there's tons of benefits of being credible. We know from the research that when you have credibility, structure, boundaries, your kids are more likely to become independent, self-reliant, have high self-esteem, have self-confidence, have good social skills and interact well with their peers, have good emotional control and emotion regulation skills. They have happier dispositions, they're more well-behaved, and they're actually better academically, more academically successful. We can increase our credibility by doing simple things. It doesn't have to be anything big. You can implement routines and structure into their lives. You can hold boundaries and limits, especially with things that will improve their behaviors, such as sleep. Like, this is really especially true with kids getting enough sleep, or eating healthy, or having meals together as a family. Those are the kinds of boundaries that will likely improve their behaviors. Second, I ask myself about the quality of my relationship with my child. So aside from having boundaries and structure, we have to be nurturing too. Sometimes misbehaviors are a cry for attention. We can always nurture even when setting limits and having boundaries. Before I share two real stories with you, I'd like you to scroll down, click like, and subscribe to my channel, and please leave a comment on what some of your real struggles are in parenting. I want to share with you two real stories, one as it relates to little kids and another as it relates to a teenager. So let's talk about the little kid first. My daughter recently shared the following story about my 2-year-old grandson. He was acting out one day. He was doing all kinds of naughty stuff, and it would have been really easy to scold him, put him in timeout, or do any other number of things that we do when kids are being naughty. But instead, she sat down with him and read him a story. And that changed everything in that moment. He was just this little boy who was sort of crying out for some attention. And that story time was this little emotional bonding moment that altered the course of his behaviors. Let me tell you another story about a teenager. This is my son. And Brian had been irritable and distant and kind of out of sorts. And Mom and I could not figure out why. He had recently hurt himself. He had broken a rib and he had bruised his knee and he had scraped himself up after he took a fall. And he had also ruined his phone several days earlier by getting it wet. So maybe that's what was going on with him, just being in a lot of physical pain. But I'll say as a side note, it was July, and this was the busiest time of the month for me. Summers are always the busiest time for me in my career. I'm often gone a lot and not very available. And I even had told him that I just didn't have time to do much of anything until middle of August when things started to slow down for me. And so we talked about making some plans then, but this was like 2 months in advance. Well, so Valerie and I were talking about Brian and trying to figure out what's going on with him and why he's sort of out of sorts. And one day I was running some errands and I was just kind of in my car and I was thinking what I could possibly do to kind of connect with him. We like to ride dirt bikes together, but he had a broken rib, so we couldn't do that. That always works with him, but we couldn't do that one. We used to love going to movies, but it was the pandemic, so that wasn't even an option at that point. I couldn't really think of anything significant to do with him, and I was kind of bummed out about it. Well, later in the morning, he was going to the gym to do some exercises that his physical therapist had asked him to do. And I was going to run some more work-related errands, but I just decided that I would go with him. So we go to the gym, and he was actually really glad about that. When we got to the gym, he told me, "I just want to work out somewhere near you." And so I hung out with him. Then we left. I asked him if he wanted to run one last errand with me, and he was fine with that. He was happy to do that, actually. And so while we're doing this last errand, he says, "Hey, Dad, do you think we could go to lunch?" And so we do that. Then we got home, and it's summer, it's warm, we have a pool, so we did a quick little swim together. Probably lasted actually about an hour. At this point, his mood has noticeably brightened. He's smiling, he's telling jokes, and he actually seems like his old self. The story just illustrates to me the power of finding little moments of connection. We did not do anything major. We just did a bunch of these little things together, and I can't tell you how much more settled he seemed to me after we did that. So the next time you're struggling getting your child's behavior under control, think of these two things. Number one, have I been credible? And are there any boundaries and limits that I should be putting into place, especially those that might make him feel better, make your son or daughter feel better? Number two, what can I do to improve the quality of my relation, my connection with them? Hey, if you've really been struggling with your kids as well, I'd like you to start with these points, but I have more for you. I put a link in the description to a free 4-part presentation that will show you how to connect with your kids. Grab a pen and paper and click the link below, and I'll see you there.